Thank you so much, guys, for being here again. I know I've thanked y'all 1,000 times already. So, starting off, I want you to just do some introductions first, and then we'll come back around and I'll explain more about, why I decided to do this, and as far as the sort of panel, I guess you would say. So we can start with Allison if you want to, just introducing yourselves and how, your reason behind being a therapist and your passion and all that good stuff.
Yeah, I'm Allison Steinhaus. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I work with families in the community doing family-centered treatment, also training other professionals that I work with in my region. I wanted to be a therapist because of some of the struggles that I went through. I grew up in the church and just got told that I just need to trust God some more, that I need to trust Him and read my Bible, and it was like a spiritual problem. And that was really hard and confusing, and became angry with God at that time and just didn't know how to handle my feelings and felt like I was crazy. So I wanted to become a therapist to help break the stigma in the church and also help young kids like me.
Awesome. Dominic Vaughn, licensed clinical mental health counselor. Also come with a plethora of experience. Currently right now I'm doing some outpatient services, but come from a long history of mental health. I was a probation officer for 12 years, so seen all types of mental health, and then inside of that realm of being a probation officer, seen a lot of stuff, and I always was a person that wanted to know the why behind everything. So I decided to go back to grad school to get my master's to become a counselor, because I feel like counseling gives you the why when people make the decisions or people have the behavior that they have. So that was my main drive, is to actually get a clear understanding of some of the stuff that we see out here in the community. Because as a probation officer, you're in the community 24/7. So it just kind of strengthens my knowledge of what's going on. So I always felt like counseling was the best way to get to it. So been a good path since I've been here, or since I've been on counseling. So I'm going to continue to grow. So that's where we at.
Okay. I'm Xavier Wilson, licensed clinical social worker. My current role, I'm a behavioral health therapist for the school system in Monroe. Much like everyone else here, I think I've kind of touched the waters of every aspect of therapy you can think of. I've worked with individuals as young as age 4, all the way up to age 75. I think my main motivation for being in this field and doing the type of work that I do is just primarily from growing up in poverty, growing up in a single parent home, and just kind of always aiming to kind of be that person that I needed back then. So that really kind of empowers the work that I do, especially when I work with individuals that come from walks of life like me. It just really gives me a purpose to kind of be able to help shape their lives and push them in the right direction.
Well, I am Markeela Batts, licensed clinical social worker. Most people know me as Shay, and then my clients know me as Ms. Keeler. Let's see, I got a lot of experience working in day treatment when I got my bachelor's in recreation therapy, and then from there I became interested in becoming a therapist. While working in day treatment, we needed to refer kids out, and there seemed to be a gap. So I wanted to go back and pursue that. And I just enjoy children. I feel like when it comes to younger kids, sometimes they get left out with things that they need as far as therapy. And a lot of people don't understand how powerful play is. So I just enjoy being an advocate for that and working with families.
Awesome. Well, my name is Kenneth Brown. I've always viewed myself as a servant, because just for the simple fact that I just have a strong passion for helping people. Even though when I played a lot of sports and things like that, I always would see the best in every situation. I always try to see the best in each person, because I had a lot of adverse experiences as well growing up as a child. There was a lot of things that I saw that I didn't necessarily agree with. But I do know that my pathway changed just from having a lot of resources and people that would affirm me. And these are some of the things I didn't always see in my community, didn't always see in some of my interactions with family and things like that. And so I just saw that. I felt like, wait, well, you know what? If you have support, If you have resources, you have the potential to be a better person regardless of what you've been through and some of your experiences. So when I was a kid, a school counselor did that for me. When I was in elementary school, had some adversities, lost everything in a house fire, things like that, and the school counselor was the one that affirmed me every day, poured into me, always told me that I could be whatever I wanted to be and things like that. And so when I got older, I reflected back on that and said, wow, I want to be a school counselor like this guy. You know what I mean? And although that guy didn't look like me, it also told me that, you know, regardless of the difference, we can all be different but still help each other. And so that encouraged me to become a school counselor, and that's where I am now.
It's amazing.
Nice.
I love hearing y'all's stories. I didn't, of course, didn't know much of any of these. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing with that to all of us. So I let's see here, being brought up in a single parent home, and just also seeing in school too, other kids and my friends and myself, not having what other people had. And as far as I know, school counselors back then, they weren't as helpful, unfortunately, like yours was, Kenneth. So talking to other people was like Allison said, pray about it, go to church, and that's it. And I didn't know what therapy was. Had no idea until I got probably to high school, maybe college, honestly, of like what it really meant. So I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor, and the track that I took was clinical mental health counseling. And I thought about school counseling, I think, at first when I first got to the program. Then I learned more about what it was, and I said I want to help people more in the community or private practice one day also. So that's why I chose the track that I chose, and it definitely is opened so many doors. Like Dominique mentioned, all of y'all, I think we've all seen so many things since we've been licensed or therapists, and we're still very young. So we're still young in the game, but yeah. So this, I just wanted to bring all of us together to talk about mental health and how we can, just express to others, resources and things that can be given to them as well, and how they're not the only ones who are experiencing these challenges also. We can start off with, actually, so going back to Dear Self, I was thinking to myself a while back, like, okay, how can I, present this, I guess you would say. Because a lot just use your company, you just use your brand. So that's how I came up with the Dear Self presents such and such. So Dear Self basically means ending the stigma, taking care of yourself, self-love, self-care, all that good stuff. So mental health first, and then how we can take care of ourselves just as a whole, holistically. So starting off, I'm going to go into, I know a lot of people get, confused mental health and mental illness and what the differences there also. So mental health, when you hear the word mental health, like what do you think when you hear that word? Anybody can...
I just think overall, your overall well-being, whether that's, cognitive, social, emotional, behavioral,
Right.
just being your best you in every sense of the word, like emphasis on the word health and, just being healthy.
Yeah.
And I would echo that. When I think of mental health, I think of the overall, but when I think of mental illness, I think of the specifics that we have, possible diagnoses and stuff into that regard. But I echo what you say, guys.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, mental health definitely. I think before I was one of those ones too who confused the two between mental health and mental illness, and like Zay and Dominique said, just being able to your overall health and being, just aware of how you're feeling and physically, mentally, of course, and emotionally also. So mental illness, when you hear that word, I know that word scares some people, like, oh, they have mental illness, something must be wrong with them. And as we know now, that doesn't mean that at all. But what, in your words, what is mental illness? What does that mean to you all?
I think for me, it means there is a form of diagnosis, and that individual struggles with a certain thing or maybe multiple things like daily. It impacts their ability to work, to interact with other people, function in the community. I think that's what it means to me, and a lot of times people do get the two confused, and we don't talk about the difference in
And I agree with that because, I think it plays a major role in just not being formally educated and understanding the difference between the two. Because, echo the same sentiments when I look at mental health. It's, your overall well-being, being healthy from a holistic standpoint. Just like sometimes if you think about being healthy, am I healthy? It's not just exercising, it's not just cardio, it's not just making sure you're eating the right food, just making sure that you're taking care of yourself from a mental standpoint, because what we think about, things that we talk about often. These are some of the things that can affect our day-to-day living, you know, and a lot of these things, they become a thought first. So when you're thinking these negative things, it can also move into your way of life. And so I think, you know, it's a way of just understanding and knowing that there's resources available to help you with those thoughts and the mental illnesses, you know, like I said, a diagnosis, knowing that just because you're diagnosed doesn't necessarily mean that there's not something that can help you. And so if someone does have a mental illness now, it's affecting my day-to-day living, how I socialize with people, it's affecting my workplace, it's affecting how I interact with my friends and family members. So with me knowing that, what are some things that I can do now with me having this to make it to where I can still be functional, still be social in these environments, although I'm aware that there's the illness. Now I can correct my mental health from being aware.
That is really good. I agree. So little transparency for me, I was looking for, as we know, private practice, they might have insurance available, they might not. So not like if you're working like a regular job. So I was looking for health insurance for myself a few months ago, and I guess back in January, and I found out that, I'm currently in therapy also for myself. So I found out that my diagnosis, which is, well, I'm gonna put it out there right now, but of course, every therapist has to diagnose for insurance purposes, right? So the man who was helping with the insurance, he was the agent, he said, well, Lauren says here that you have this diagnosis, once we contact your therapist. So, of course, tip-top shape, that, of course, mental health, not really my physical health. So I was like, would that matter? And he was like, well, yeah, it matters to insurance companies. He said, not to me, no, but insurance companies, yes. So I immediately felt like, okay, I felt like an actual client that we see who we're, look down upon because I can't get this particular service that I need because I have this diagnosis, basically. And I kind of got mad at my therapist, and I was like, you didn't tell me this. And she was like, well, Lauren, you know how it works, because you're a therapist also. So, it wasn't her fault at all. But how the insurance companies can look at you just based off a piece of paper, and they say, like, oh, they don't qualify for the service because of this insurance, because they have this mental illness. So, the diagnosis, I'll say that. But I was able to sit in, on the client side, I guess you would say, because I'm like, wow, I had no idea it was that serious, but I guess it is. All right, so definitely mental health, mental illness, the difference between the two, definitely there. Here are some stats that I seen last night. So nearly 1 in 5, which is 19%, U.S. adults experience some form of mental illness. 1 in 24, which is 4.1%, has a serious mental illness, and 1 in 12, 8.5%, has a diagnosable substance abuse disorder. So this was, I think, very current, like February this year. And I also know that it's actually gone up too because of the pandemic as well. So going into stigmas, like I know when I mentioned, of course, Allison mentioned in the church and how it's definitely stigmatized, and I think we all can agree with that too. That's where the main stigma, in my opinion, where mental health is. What are some other stigmas besides in the church? Anything else that we see in our community?
One of the things that I hear all the time is when you say mental health or mental illness, people think you're crazy. That's the first thing that comes out of your mouth. Yep. I ain't crazy, I ain't this and I ain't that. And I don't know where that started at, but it's something that has been going around for a long time. Yeah. And so by the time you sit down and actually, explain to people that just because you got a mental illness don't mean you're crazy. One of the stigmas that I hear is when you say mental illness, everybody got bipolar. That is the mental illness that's thrown around everywhere. Everybody got bipolar. And actually people don't even know what bipolar is. So have to do a lot of education to get people, to actually come out and discuss some of the issues that they got and kind of normalize, hey, you're not crazy, you don't have bipolar, you got anxiety, that's a different thing. So, just educating people, I think, is the biggest thing, which I do believe now as we stand in 2021, time goes forward, I think people are becoming more equipped, more understanding about mental illness. I know the church that I attend, I've oftentimes heard the pastor say, I heard the pastor say, hey, we're here for you, but they also got professionals, mental health professionals that specialize in that, and not so much rely on the religious part. So I think if pastors and other people who have these things start to put the word out and educate others, people are here, and then it won't be so stigmatized, but it still is to this day.
I definitely think that in the African American community, church weighs heavily on an individual's perception of addressing mental health. I think the second biggest one for me that I've seen is just kind of the notion that, you know, what happens in my house stays in my house. So in the African American community, it's like, you know, it's no one's business, you know, we're gonna deal with it as a family unit, but the downfall to that is once those behaviors start impacting the community, little Johnny goes out to school, goes out in the community and has these behaviors, those behaviors have now left your home. So at this point, it's more than just, you know, what's going on within my household, because now these behaviors are showcasing themselves in other environments as well. And I think just trying to overcome that stigma alone, as we said, educating and just kind of reframing that perspective that, you know, we got, everything that happens in here stays here, and just being okay with seeking help and, you know, letting someone kind of direct you and educate you.
That's so true.
Sometimes I think about, or I feel that the stigma is somewhat decreasing, especially in the African American community, but when I take a step back and look at that, I feel like that's based off my personal experience, meaning my friends, people that I follow on Twitter, and like we talk about it more and I'm more transparent about it. But then when I go to work, there's other people that still have those same feelings towards mental health, and that may be due to lack of education or lack of resources. So it gives me the opportunity to, like you said, reframe and provide that education, because that stigma is still there, especially specifically around younger children. So we're contracted to go into Head Start centers and kind of like observe, and then if we see behaviors, reach out and provide support to the child in the classroom and or parents. But when I reach out to those parents, the first thing I hear is, my child ain't crazy. Or mental health, like, you trying to say my baby crazy? Like, that's the first thing I get. And so trying to explain what mental health looks like and how a child can be holistic and healthy is something that I'm still trying to like navigate and work through. I feel like I've grown in that area, but yeah, again, I feel like the stigma has decreased in some aspect, but I think that points to us that are educated, have degrees, and know more about it, and everybody in the African American community hasn't had the opportunities to experience things like that.
That's so true.
And when thinking of a solution, and that's one of the things, I'm always a solution focused type guy. I think that having group discussions like this, the more we put platforms like this on social media, because everybody watches social media, I think that will educate a lot more people. And then one of the trends that I have seen is word of mouth is everything. Word of mouth travels fast. So for those who go through, have therapy, and then have a positive result, when they spread that out to other people in the community, one, that's destigmatizing the stigma, and that's also encouraging people to say, hey, look, me and Johnny, there's not too much of a difference. If it worked for him, at least let me give it a try. And then once they go out and give it a try, once they have positive results, now they'll tell other people. Now, one of the things that playing devil's advocate on that, if they don't have a positive result, then they can go out and spread that word too. But I always think that, you know, when you do it, or when you go through counseling and you provide the feedback, this worked for me, this didn't work for me, and they share that with other people, then that would make it not so hard to actually come through the door and say, hey, this is the issue that I have. So, you know, I think that could be a possible solution of, you know, destigmatizing or something.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, when you were talking, I was just thinking about the ripple effect that we can have. Like, we saw needs, so we went to school so we could be that person that we wanted when we were younger, and how you're seeing the impact in like your immediate community. And I just think for me, like, I went to school because I saw a need in the church and how I felt when I was younger. And now these people who maybe feel like they can't reach out for help are coming to me, a safe person that they have a personal relationship with, and I'm able to point them to get help and to get resources. Like, hey, I believe in the Bible and that's great, but what an opportunity for you to sit across from a Christian therapist who's trained in these things and also has the Spirit living inside them for them to help you work through your struggles. So I think like these things are awesome and great, but I think like us just being open and willing to talk to people and helping them, and like Dom said, like then they're gonna tell somebody else and tell somebody else, and the impact will be great.
Can you say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say like everything you got. I mean, this is just so powerful. You know, I'm excited. I'm gonna be wanting to sit on my hands and everything. Because the one thing that I have noticed is this: like what we're doing, sit down, having a conversation. These things do not take place. They do not take place in a lot of the churches. They do not take place in a lot of our homes. I know in my family, not trying to be, but I'm sure a lot of people probably can relate to this. You know, like we didn't sit down and have conversations at the dinner table. Like we'd have food, and most of the time we'd say, okay, well, you get your plate, you go somewhere, sit down. I could go to my room and watch TV and play the game and things like that. So it's like we growing up, we're too busy to sit down and have real conversations, and then also sit down having conversations, being receptive to something that is different. You know, because all of us, we all have different pathways, but we're sitting here looking at each other, engaged, having conversations, and being open to the dialogue, and then we see that, you know what, a lot of these things are very, very similar. And so with the church, I can relate to that because that's where a lot of us get hurt from the beginning. There's a lot of church hurt, and that's when some people, they leave the church because of that pain that's never been healed. And for a lot of us, you know, sometimes the church is the foundation in the beginning of where we start seeing some of these things, and the conversations are not taking place. They talk about certain things that they want to talk about. They talk about certain things that may be going on in their own church instead of talking about things that we may see in the community. So then we go out here in the world, we go to school, we go to a job, and we're not prepared for these things because we never heard about it before. And then so even in our families, we have things called race secrets, you know, where some things with our culture and things with our race, we do not discuss it because we're trying to protect something in our family, but really we don't understand that we're causing more damage and causing more problems. And so those behaviors start coming out when they start acting out and behaving. Okay, well, you don't say anything about this because this will lead to this. Well, don't say this, don't do this. Or if they ask you this, say this. And so what it is you're training someone to not even be themselves, not even tell the truth, not even acknowledging the truth. And we do have to reframe our thinking. That's the beginning, you know, because we typically I didn't know that I grew up in a household that was dysfunctional. I'm thinking if somebody cuss at me, that's love, that's normal. But then when I got older, I realized, you know what, you're supposed to have a conversation with me that's like this. That's different. I didn't know that existed. So these are some of the things that and it's just a natural thing. It's not that we're saying this person is wrong, this person is a bad person, anything like that. But it's just from not having these dialogues, not having these conversations is where we really misinform.
That's so true. It is. I was telling Allison earlier before we started that my home church back home, they had a little mental health 3 years ago. And so one of the ladies said, Lauren, you come to church and give a little presentation on mental health. And I was like, wow, this is the first time it's ever happened here, probably in other black churches. So I was like, I would love to. So little presentation on depression, I think anxiety was the main topics, and we talked about people ask questions, older people ask questions. It was so beautiful because that never happens in a black church. So probably any church, honestly, but it was very open, and they were excited to hear more information about things that they had no idea even existed. So but yeah, I agree, stigma is definitely deep in the church and in our own families too, in our homes. And I have some clients who come in, older clients, Lauren, my parents said I probably shouldn't even tell you this because they think, well, she might think you're crazy. And I was she was like, no, that's not why you're here. It's a safe place, don't think that at all. But it hurts me to hear that a lot of kids, and even adults too, that's what happens. It starts when we're, a child. So then when you get older, we still have that same mindset that, I couldn't express my feelings back then. So I have to hold this stuff back because my dad and mom will be pissed at me for even saying anything to even to my therapist. So, but yeah, this is definitely hopefully will help decrease the stigma in the mental health community. It won't stop it completely, we know that, but at least hopefully be a good start too.
I think one thing that's really important to kind of address or point out when we're talking about stigmas within the African American community, and I thought about this when you were talking about, the dinner table and being, a protector. So ultimately we know in most cultures, the man is the protector, the provider. So a lot of the times in the African American community, we see that a lot of our brothers, our men, do not buy into therapy. They do not believe in therapy. And from my experience and, just talking to colleagues and people in the community, it's kind of viewed as being weak or less than. Like, if I'm the man of my family, why would I go talk to somebody about my issues? Why would I go, vent and lay my burdens down on someone else when, as a man, a protector, a provider, I should be figuring this out on my own? And, I really want to speak to the fact that as men, it's okay to not be okay. But you definitely don't want to dwell there. It's okay to go out here, seek therapy, seek whatever services you need to become greater, to become better, to become an even better, stronger provider for your family. It's the weak part about it is not, going out there and getting those tools and interventions and things that you need to become a stronger you. So I just wanted to really address that and point that out to all of our men in the African American community that think that, therapy is weak. It's not. It's definitely not.
So true. And I really applaud, and I tell my black male friends, like, I'm so, and family too, with black men, like, I'm so proud of y'all. Like, not saying from a therapist, because, like, you mean a lot to me, and, some of them, they're the first in their families to ever seek therapy. So I love that so much about them. I really do, because I know it's probably looked down upon by their parents or grandparents or whoever too, but it's a big step that y'all take as far as men, to seek therapy also.
To add to, like, destigmatizing the solutions, I also think about the fact that there are other forms of therapy that don't get talked about as often. So sometimes when I let parents or people know, well, you can go to a support group, so you're not by yourself, and this is kind of like what it will look like. You have other people that you can relate to going through some of the same things. And then sometimes relationships are built off of that. Like, I've had parents go to a support group, then they realize they're both single moms and their spouses passed away, and they get their children together for play dates. And then there's also workbooks for people that can't afford it. So, if you can't afford like a book or two, to do a little bit of research and work through that workbook and try to learn a little bit more about yourself. So those are solutions as well. And then going back to interactions with family, I realized, like, the more through grad school, the more I became self-aware and realized things about myself as far as mental health. I wanted to go back and, like, tell my family and share with my family. I grew up in the church as well, so I would go back home and talk and get things like, why are you using those big words? Or what in the world are you talking about? And so I realized that approach was not working at all. So I started to go back home and just model. I wouldn't say anything. I would just model, and I would talk about my stress or my anxiety, and I chose to go for a walk, or I got me a new coloring book, or I'm going on vacation, and I'm probably going to be gone for like a week, and then I come back and take another weekend off to rest from the vacation. So just modeling those different things, I would probably say, like, a little over a year and a half, I started to see my family talk about it a little bit more in a different way. So, I think that's helpful too.
Yeah, it is. I agree.
That's very key. Model the behavior that you want to see. That is so true. That is so key. And then also like viewing things as a weakness. So I'm a sports guy. So, like, the first thing you do is, like, when you play sports, or or if you want to decide if you want to lift weights, if a person just goes to the gym and work on the same things all the time, you're going to build up these areas that are strong, and then there's going to be some areas that are still weak. And then when you go try to do something else and lift a little bit heavier, the first thing you're going to do is have an injury. Why? Because you have something that is weak. so the thing about it is, people have to also understand that the areas that you're weak, it's not a bad thing.
Right.
But what can you do to strengthen the areas that you're weak in? So from a holistic standpoint, overall you'll be much stronger. And I know with my nephews, they really pay attention. They pay attention to everything that I do. But when I was back home, they never saw me working. They never saw me studying, reading, doing research and things of that nature. They just saw the result from it. They just like, okay, Unkson has a degree, he's doing this, he's doing that, he's purchased this, he's purchased that, but they never saw the work behind it. And so that's why I think when you model the behavior, it's very important. They need to see, how did you get to that point? From taking these walks, from doing this research, from going to see a therapist, taking care of myself, from addressing my mental health and things of that nature. That is why I am the way I am today. So I think it's very important for our family and our friends to see that.
Yeah, I agree. one example I always use, I'm sure I've used it too, and with families or the clients in general, maybe family too, is comparing mental health with seeing a doctor. Like if you're diagnosed with cancer, God forbid, or anything else, you wouldn't just sit at home like, oh yeah, I'm gonna pray about it. Okay, what are you gonna do about it though? So the next step is to get help for whatever you need physically also. But yeah, that's good. Anything else on that one? Yeah, that was good. That was real good. Real good. Going into mental health and the pandemic in general. So of course we know the depression, anxiety has really been on the high since last year, March or February of last year. So things that we've seen in our own clientele and our own families also, and even in ourselves, what are some things that you've seen just in general, like changes within you first, like since the pandemic? Like what if mental health or emotional health, I guess you would say, that you've noticed?
I'll jump in. I noticed for me personally, an increase in my anxiety. Meaning like constantly worried about the future and things that would happen. Just with so much was unknown with the pandemic. So I was always like thinking ahead about just personal things, which led me to trying to really practice things that I teach my clients and families and be more mindful in the moment and appreciate things a little bit more. And then what I saw in my clients and families were an increase in stress, of course, especially with parents being at home, working from home, trying to do schoolwork at the same time, just navigating all that. So there were oftentimes I would call my families, and before I started the session with the child, I would check in with the parent and genuinely ask, like, how are you? And if it's not okay, tell me it's not okay. And a lot of my parents thanked me because they felt like they didn't have any other space where they could like be open and honest and say, I'm having a hard time or I don't know what to do. And then the more I worked with my kids, probably like April-ish of 2020 through the summer, I feel like that's when my kids started to feel it. So working with ages, like usually my youngest is 3 going all the way up to 18, but doing sessions and activities with them, they were tired of being home, missing their friends. I miss my teachers. We didn't get to do anything today. I'm tired of being in the house. So realizing that it hit kids just as hard as it hit adults, and then trying to figure out ways to communicate that to parents so that they can understand as well. So that's what I saw.
One of the things that I've seen personally inside of myself is when the pandemic hit, I like to be really adaptable. I always think that I can adapt to any situation that's out there. You put me in the middle of the field, I'll survive. You put me in the middle of the city, I'm gonna survive. Because I just have adaptability like that. So when the pandemic came and we had to change things around professionally and personally, I was able to adapt, navigate through the changes that we have and still keep a steady flow of things. So that just the pandemic kind of reaffirmed that, okay, the steps that I took before the pandemic, I always save, I always have this and that, that really made me appreciate the steps that I had, before this thing happening. And so working with my clients that I have, because I work with, during the pandemic, at that time I worked with majority of adults. I seen the adults who wasn't prepared, then I seen those street savvy adults who kind of like me, they able to adapt, get food, toilet paper, gas, whatever they need. They was able to still maintain what they had. So me as being a counselor, I really dwelled on that as being a strength for those that done that, but for those who wasn't prepared, that was a teaching moment to say, hey, you never know what can happen. We get through this pandemic, but make sure if another one arises, make sure you're better prepared. Now, something that I'm seeing currently right now and doing outpatient is a lot of clients are having anxiety about getting back out into the world. I know I had a young lady that came in who the husband didn't work and she worked, so she was the breadwinner of the house, and she was kind of feeling that anxiety of having the responsibilities that the husband usually have. Now she has it, even though he has now started to go back to work. She was just still real anxious about being able to provide for the family. They just had 1-year-old, but that's another thing, during the pandemic, babies have grown up. Yeah, that population has arrived, a lot more kids out here, so that's something that we have seen. So she was just having anxiety about moving forward and continuing the year and getting back from what they have lost. So that's something that we really looked at, which I didn't really think about that. In my mind, I was like, okay, the world opened back up, everybody's back, but now you have to readapt from where you changed that before. So
I agree, definitely was anxiety provoking. For me personally, I'm a planner. Like, I'm goal oriented, I'm very strategic. So when the pandemic hit, it was just kind of like, well, wait a minute, like I haven't even accomplished all, my dreams, my goals, like we can't go out like this.
Right.
But furthermore, just having to be a calm for someone else when I'm trying to navigate this, because this is new to me and I'm living this just as much as the consumer, and being the voice of reason, being a go-to for somebody when I'm navigating this as well. That was very overwhelming at times, but I did, as therapists, we always trying to find the good in everything, and I always say you got to go through it to grow through it, and it just really kind of reinforced, like you said, practicing what we preach. We tell people every single day, giving them tools and interventions to be great, and it was just like an opportunity to kind of kick our own toolkits into overdrive for ourselves. And I think just being someone that in school I knew just enough about technology to get through, having to, dive head first into this virtual world and these telehealth sessions, and trying to teach someone else who may not have a GED or, may not know how to work a computer or Wi-Fi, trying to teach them how to navigate a Zoom session or a DoxyMe session just was very overwhelming and frustrating at times. And still is. We've gotten better, but it's still, when you're in the middle of like a passionate discussion and the computer freezes and it's like, oh gosh, like hold that thought while we, reboot this. So definitely anxiety provoking in my opinion.
I think therapists, we all have become stronger in many areas since the pandemic, and it's like, of course, we're needed, especially during this time. And I knew we're always important, but we really are important now. So moving forward too, I'm sure. I know for myself, definitely anxious more. That's when I actually sought out a therapist. I think, last October, I think it was, as well for myself. And I can say this, my self-care definitely got better. I was outside in the park. I was always outside. I had just started my new job, now. So of course my clientele wasn't where it is now. So I always had time to do stuff like doing, of course safe things, but definitely self-care definitely increased, I would say. So if anything, positive with that.
Before the pandemic, I was never home. So when they pulled us back, I was like, oh my goodness, I get to stay home. And like therapists do, we try to see the positives and everything. So I just saw that as an opportunity for me to grow my skills as a therapist. Like, how am I going to engage somebody we have to have 2-hour sessions. I'm supposed to engage people who don't want therapy to be able to talk to me. So that was a challenge for me, and I was excited about that until like the pandemic just didn't end, because I thought that it was going to end at some point. And like a couple months into it, I just noticed myself like working 16 to 18-hour days and just throwing myself into work, because I knew that if I slowed down, I have to feel my feelings, and I did not want to do that. So the pandemic was exciting because I learned a lot. I feel like I grew as a professional, but also like there were moments of isolation. I felt super lonely, and realizing that, man, I need people more than I thought I did, which also provided another opportunity on the other side of that.
That's very good. For me, the first thing I noticed is that my clothes were fitting differently. That's the first thing I noticed. My weight was going up, it was going down, more up than down. I noticed that, you know, I was spending more money because I was getting spoiled, ordering everything to go and get delivered. So, I mean, that was one thing. I'm like, okay, Brian, you got to chill. Like, you do a little bit too much. But from the positive side of it, I think it allowed us to see ourselves. It allowed us to look in the mirror and also see how strong and resilient we really are as people. We actually had to work together and do things collectively. Like, you know what, if I were to go out and do some things, it can affect some other people if I'm not careful. So it taught us, like, you know what, think about other people as well as thinking of yourselves. It exposed us really. Just simple with, even in your home environment, if you do have kids and things like that, you know, you can't keep someone busy from an activity now. We got to have some conversations. We can't just sit out, because, you know, sometimes you go out to eat, you see a family of 10, everyone's on their cell phone at the dinner table. No one's talking, no one's having a conversation. But now you have to spend that time together. You have to sit there and have conversations. What are we going to do? How are we going to overcome this? Let's have some family time. Let's play some board games. These are some of the things that were not present in families before. And then you realize, you know what? We might be kind of dope. Like, I might like you as a person. You know what I mean? But before, we always had some time. So all these activities, they kept us busy and occupied our time. It forced me to become more comfortable with technology. It made me realize, you know what? I love my family. I miss my family. But I always had an excuse before. I was doing a bachelor's degree. I was doing an event. I was pursuing a master's degree. I had to do other school engagements and working engagements. And I realized, you know what, you're more than just a school counselor. This is not just who you are. You do love family. You do love spending time with friends. But then that was taken away from me because, hey, you can't go anywhere. I have to be in the house by 9 o'clock. I haven't had rules since I was a kid living at home. So I'm like, now you're giving me rules where I can't go anywhere. I can't. And so I really had to sit down and think about these things and say, wow, like, I really miss my friends. I really miss my family. Then, okay, well, was I a good friend? Was I a good son? You know, things like that. What are some things that I can do? It really forced me to look at myself, and then it also allowed me to see how blessed I was at the same time, because I had access to so many things. I was considered an essential worker, so I could still receive a paycheck. I didn't have to deal with unemployment and things of that nature. I did plan. I did have food and stocked up in some of these things. I did have transportation. And so with some of my students, it was hard because they were so used to just going to the school. I work at a Pt.1 school, and so now you're forcing that if I already struggle a little bit, now I have to do everything on the computer. I struggle with reading comprehension. Now everything for me is reading comprehension. Am I going to have success? Am I going to have a problem? Like, some of these things that we don't value as much, they become super duper important, but it allowed us to see how important things are really to us and what they mean to us, and it taught us appreciation. And also, I'm like, okay, there's some things that I want to do. There's some things I would like to accomplish. Now, not being a planner and being a person that would try to adjust everything, I have to plan now. I have to put everything on the calendar, because the things that I could do before, it was easier for me to reach kids when I'm in the building. Now I have to wait on them to get on the Zoom. I have to wait on them to get on Microsoft Teams. I waited on kids 45 minutes to an hour to show up, and then they don't. Now I can't give them the information I need, but that's how I'm being evaluated. So then that created anxiety for me, because I'm like, wow, the same things that Mr. Brown was doing before, he's not able to do them. And so I realized, you know what? You are a person. You are human too. So then, like, whenever I was making mistakes and seeing that I couldn't get something done or a task completed because of the shortage, it made me understand and be more understanding to other people if they couldn't do something, if they didn't do the homework and things like that, due to how their mental health played a role in that. So it taught me some things about myself, but it also taught me some good things too, like, we're really resilient as people, and we can overcome adversity if we work together.
That's so true. Yeah, I definitely think the pandemic was, you know, a blessing in disguise. I definitely think for a lot of us, and it definitely had some positive, you know, we got a lot of outlet, I think, you know, whether it's professionally or personally, we got some things out of it.